In a crowded city park, an elderly black woman, weary from life but still carrying dignity, is humiliated by a police officer while breastfeeding her infant grandson. Unbeknownst to the officer, this woman is his biological mother, whom he lost contact with decades ago. Their painful clash exposes themes of injustice, hidden family wounds, and the redemptive power of truth. The late afternoon sun poured its golden light across the city park, bathing the grass in warmth. Children's laughter drifted in the distance, mingling with the rhythmic squeak of swings and the soft rustle of trees. Amid the scattered benches and walking paths, an elderly woman sat cross-legged under an oak tree, her back hunched but steady. Her arms wrapped around a baby. Her skin was dark and weathered, lined with years of hardship that no lotion or remedy could smooth away. Her long white hair, tied loosely, shimmered like threads of silver against her shoulders. She rocked slowly, whispering faint prayers that slipped through her lips like breaths of wind. The baby nestled close to her chest, tiny fists curling and uncurling, suckling softly as if the world beyond his mother's warmth did not exist. To a passerby, she might have looked like any grandmother enjoying an afternoon with her grandchild. But her eyes told another story. Beneath the tenderness lay shadows, memories that tightened her jaw and hollowed her cheeks. Each line in her face carried a secret. Hunger endured, nights without shelter. The echo of choices made long ago. The park was alive, yet she felt a strange isolation, as though an invisible wall kept her apart from the laughter and conversations around her. A jogger slowed down as he passed, his brow furrowing at the sight of her. Two women walking their dogs exchanged whispers and side glances. She lowered her gaze, clutching the baby tighter, as though shielding him not just from the cool breeze, but from the weight of their judgment. "Don't you worry, my sweet," she murmured, brushing a strand of hair from the infant's forehead. "Your grandma's here. I'll always keep you safe." Her voice trembled, half a promise, half a plea. The baby shifted, letting out a soft cry before returning to his feeding. The sound drew more attention. A group of teenagers snickered from a nearby bench, holding up a phone as though recording. She pretended not to notice, though the sting reached her heart. Once long ago, she had been invisible, ignored, discarded. Now even her existence was entertainment. Still, she held her head with quiet dignity. Her body may have been frail, but a flame flickered inside her, the kind that only decades of survival could sustain. From across the park, a pair of uniformed officers strolled along the path. Their navy shirts stood out against the greenery, radios clipped at their sides. They laughed at something between them, one gesturing broadly with his hand. The woman's pulse quickened. She had lived too long not to recognize the weight of authority, how quickly it could shift from casual to cruel. She whispered again, not a prayer this time, but a reminder to herself. "Stay calm. Do nothing to draw them near." Her fingers trembled as she adjusted the blanket around the baby, but calm was not enough. A ball bounced nearby, and a child chased after it, nearly colliding with her. The commotion drew one officer's eyes in her direction. His gaze lingered, his laughter faded. He slowed his steps. The woman's stomach tightened. She had felt this gaze before. The measuring look, the silent question of whether she belonged. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She rocked the baby harder, hoping to mask her fear in motion. Around her the whispers grew louder. Her mother pulled her child closer as they walked past. Another man muttered under his breath about decency. The elderly woman could feel the walls of judgment closing in. She was a spectacle now, not a person. The baby whimpered again, and she tried to hush him, but the sound carried. The officer's boots crunched on the gravel as he turned from the path. His partner raised a brow, hesitated, then followed. Her heart pounded. Every instinct screamed to leave, to vanish before confrontation. But where could she go? This patch of grass beneath the oak was the only peace she had found in days. Her body stiffened, rooted to the ground by fatigue, by fear, by the unbearable weight of history repeating itself. The taller officer approached, his silhouette blotting out the sunlight as it fell across her. His hand rested casually, yet ominously, on his belt. His expression was unreadable, carved in stone. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice sharp enough to pierce the murmurs of the crowd. The woman's breath caught in her throat. She clutched the baby tighter, her prayer breaking into silence. The officer took another step forward, eyes narrowing. Suspicion etched into every line of his face. The moment froze, the park quieting, the crowd watching, the officer standing over her. ready to question her every breath. The officer's shadow loomed longer as he stepped closer. The woman's heart thudded against her ribs, loud enough she thought the crowd might hear. She looked down at the baby, his eyelids fluttering as he fed, and tried to steady her breath. But it was no use. Fear had already climbed her spine like icy water. "Ma'am," the officer repeated, his tone firmer. "What exactly are you doing here?" She lifted her chin, though her hands shook. I'm feeding my grandson," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The officer's gaze flickered to the child, then back to her. His jaw tightened. "In public? Like this?" His words cut sharp, tinged with disgust, her throat constricted. He was hungry. I had nowhere else to go." Behind them, whispers multiplied. The teenagers on the bench laughed under their breath, holding up a phone to capture the moment. A man with a stroller muttered, "Unbelievable," while shaking his head. Their judgment felt like stones hurled at her fragile dignity. The baby stirred, fussing louder, as though sensing the rising tension. She rocked him quickly, whispering soothing words. "Shh, my sweet, it's all right. Grandma's here." The officer crouched, his face closer now. His eyes were sharp, studying her as if she were a criminal rather than a weary grandmother. "Do you have any identification? A home address? You can't just sit here like this." Her lips trembled. I don't have it with me." She looked away, shame burning hot against her cheeks. "Of course you don't," he muttered. His partner, who had been standing a few paces back, shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should just let her—" "No!" The first officer cut in, his tone snapping like a whip. "Rules are rules. We can't have people loitering like this. Feeding a child in public, indecently, it's a disturbance." The woman flinched at the word indecent. She pressed the baby tighter against her chest, as if shielding him from the insult. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He's just a baby. I'm not hurting anyone." The officer's eyes narrowed. He reached down suddenly and grabbed her arm. His grip was firm, unyielding, the kind that brooked no argument. The baby startled, crying out, tiny hands flailing. "Get up," he ordered. "You can't stay here." Pain shot through her frail arm as he pulled, and she gasped, clutching the child to her body. Her scarf slipped loose from her shoulders, falling to the grass. The crowd leaned in, cell phones raised higher now, eager to record every second. The officer tugged again, his patience thinning. The woman winced, a low cry escaping her lips. "Please don't," she begged. Her scarf lay crumpled at her side, and for a fleeting second the officer's gaze dropped to it. Something in her exposed neckline caught his eye, a faded birthmark just beneath her collarbone. His brow furrowed, his grip faltering for the briefest moment. The woman noticed the pause. Her breath hitched, but she dared not speak. The baby wailed louder, his cries piercing through the murmurs of the park. The officer clenched his jaw and straightened, as though shaking off the momentary hesitation. He tightened his hold, pulling her up from the ground. "You're coming with me," he declared. The crowd murmured in excitement, phones flashing. A woman whispered, "This is going viral," her tone more entertained than horrified. The elderly woman staggered to her feet, clutching the baby desperately to her chest. Her knees wobbled, her body frail under the officer's commanding grip. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks as humiliation pressed down heavier than the officer's hand. The partner shifted again, voice uncertain. "Hey, maybe this isn't worth—" But the first officer cut him off, his tone low, almost mocking. "Everyone has to learn respect." The baby's cries echoed across the park, the sound raw, urgent, impossible to ignore. The woman's sobs mingled with them, her voice breaking as she whispered again and again, "Please, please." The crowd leaned closer, their phones glowing like tiny, merciless spotlights. The world around her shrank until only three things remained: the officer's unyielding grip, the baby's desperate cries, and the unbearable shame crushing her chest. The officer's hand shifted, pulling something from his belt, a coiled rope, its rough strands catching the light. He held it loosely in one hand, testing its weight. The woman's eyes widened in horror. Her knees nearly gave out beneath her. The rope was not around her yet, but the sight of it alone sent memories rushing back. Memories of fear, of restraint, of years spent trapped in invisible chains. The officer smirked, oblivious to the storm brewing in her heart. "Maybe this will make things easier," he muttered. The rope dangled between them, heavy with threat. The woman gasped, clutching her grandchild tighter, her mind screaming with memories she thought she had buried forever. The rope dangled from the officer's hand, swaying slightly in the breeze. Its coarse strands caught the late afternoon light, turning it into something more sinister than a simple tool. The old woman froze, her entire body tightening, as if every muscle had remembered a lifetime of chains and commands. "Please." Her voice was cracked, barely audible, yet filled with terror. Don't do this." The officer tilted his head, eyes narrowing at her trembling form. To him it was routine, an act of control. To her, it was humiliation sharpened into a weapon. "You're resisting," he said flatly. "And resisting has consequences." The baby wailed louder, the sound desperate and shrill. The woman rocked him in her arms, her tears spilling freely now. "He's hungry. He's just a child. Let us go. I beg you." The officer shook his head, the smirk never leaving his lips. "Begging doesn't change the law." His fingers curled tighter around the rope. Around them, the crowd's chatter grew more animated. Some gasped in disapproval, others chuckled, amused by the unfolding scene. Phones stayed raised, their red recording lights glowing like unblinking eyes. A young man muttered, "This is gold. Gonna blow up online." The old woman wanted to disappear, to sink into the earth beneath her feet. But the officer pulled the rope taut in his hands, and the sharp sound of its fibers straining cut through her thoughts like a blade. He moved closer, lifting the rope as though to circle it around her arms. She flinched violently, her whole body jerking back. And in that moment, a memory split across her vision. Not of the park, but of another time, another place. She saw herself years younger, hair black instead of white, sitting in a hospital bed, her body weak from childbirth, her arms cradling a tiny newborn boy. A nurse had walked in, stern-faced, clipboard in hand. "You can't keep him," they had said. "You're not fit." She had begged then, too, her voice raw. But her arms had been pried open, the baby taken away, her cries drowned by the cold machinery of the system. The echo of that moment slammed into her chest. Now once again, she clutched a baby while authority loomed over her with ropes and rules. Once again, she was powerless, voiceless, stripped of dignity. Her sob turned into a scream. "Why do you do this? Why do you treat me like I'm nothing?" The officer faltered just slightly. The sound of her anguish pierced through his hardened exterior, but only for a second. He tightened his grip again, muttering, "Stop making a scene." His partner shifted uncomfortably. "Man, maybe this is going too far." But the first officer cut him a glare that silenced him. "You don't get it. Discipline matters." The old woman's knees buckled. She sank lower to the ground, clutching the baby protectively. The rope brushed against her arm, its roughness grazing her skin. She cried out as if it burned. "Stop!" she pleaded. "You don't know what you're doing." The officer leaned down, his face close to hers, his eyes cold and unyielding. "Then tell me what I'm doing, huh? Tell me." For a heartbeat the world seemed to still. Her gaze locked on his face, the hard line of his jaw, the shape of his brow, the small scar above his right eye. Something flickered in her memory, something impossibly familiar. Her breath caught. "No," she whispered, almost inaudibly. The officer frowned. "What?" She shook her head, unable to speak the thought aloud, the possibility too wild to believe. But deep inside, her chest tightened with recognition, as if an old, buried truth was clawing its way back to the surface. The baby's cry broke the silence, sharp and aching. The infant's tiny hand stretched outward, grabbing blindly. His little fingers brushed against the officer's wrist, clinging for a moment before releasing. The officer stiffened at the touch, an odd shiver running through him. He shook it off quickly, glaring harder as though to mask whatever had stirred inside him. "You're done here," he barked, looping the rope more tightly in his fist. "You're coming with me." The old woman's sobs grew harsher, her words spilling out in fragments. "Please, stop. He doesn't deserve this." "Not again!" The crowd pressed closer, hungry for more. Phones angled higher, capturing her tears, the rope, the officer's unrelenting stance. To them it was drama. To her it was torment. And as the officer reached forward once more, she whispered a name under her breath, so soft it nearly vanished into the noise, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in decades. The officer froze for just a moment, his brows knitting together, the rope hung suspended, his grip tightening, but his expression suddenly shaken. The woman's whispered word, a name, lingered in the air, threatening to unravel everything he thought he knew. The name slipped from her lips like a ghost escaping its tomb, barely more than a whisper, but heavy enough to stop the officer's hand, mid-air. His brows furrowed, his grip on the rope faltering. "What did you just say?" His voice was sharp, but beneath it was a flicker of uncertainty. The old woman's breath came in shallow bursts. She couldn't bring herself to repeat it, not yet. Her mind was spinning, caught between the reality before her and the shadows of her memory. Could it be? After all these years? The baby whimpered, breaking the silence. She clutched him tighter, rocking instinctively. Tears blurred her vision, but in that blur she saw another infant. Not this one, but a boy she had once cradled in a sterile hospital room. His face, so tiny, so perfect. Her arms had felt whole then, filled with promise. Until the promise was ripped away, her body remembered the tearing more than her mind. Nurses prying her baby from her arms, her screams echoing down the sterile hallway. "You're too young. You can't raise him." The judge's voice, cold and final. She had fought, begged, but poverty had condemned her, and the system had stolen what love could not protect. And now, decades later, a man stood before her with that same sharp brow, that same hard jawline. Could the universe be cruel enough to bring him back this way, as her oppressor rather than her child? She gasped, her lips trembling. It can't be. The officer's face hardened again, his uncertainty buried under the shield of authority. "Answer me. What did you call me?" Her body shook. The baby in her arms fussed, reaching up as if sensing her turmoil. She smoothed his hair, whispering through her tears. "I called you by the name I gave my son." The officer blinked, his jaw tightening. He gave a short, incredulous laugh. "Lady, you're out of your mind." But even as he said it, the rope loosened slightly in his grip. Something in her voice had pierced him, though he refused to admit it. The crowd murmured louder, sensing something strange in the air. Phones zoomed closer, recording every flinch, every crack in his armor. The partner officer stepped forward, frowning. "What's she talking about?" "Nothing," the first snapped, though his voice wasn't as steady as before. The old woman's tears fell freely now. "You have his eyes," she whispered. "His eyes and his stubborn jaw. You stand the way he did when he was little, pretending to be strong even when he was afraid." His stomach lurched. He forced a scoff, but his hands betrayed him, trembling slightly around the rope. "I don't know what game you're playing," he muttered, though his tone lacked conviction. She shook her head, gripping the baby tighter. "No game, no lie. I know my own blood. I've seen you before, not as a man, but as a child." "My child," the officer's chest tightened. Images flickered unbidden, flashes from his youth he'd long buried. The faces of foster parents, unfamiliar bedrooms, the gnawing ache of not knowing where he'd come from. He remembered asking once, timidly, if his real mother had ever tried to keep him. The answer had been silence. Now here she was, ragged, desperate, her eyes pleading with a truth too wild to believe. The crowd pressed closer, their whispers turning into questions. "What's going on? Did she just say he's her son?" The phone stayed steady, recording with ruthless focus. The officer clenched his jaw, trying to steady himself. "Stop lying," he barked, but his voice cracked on the last word. Her own cracked too, but with grief. "I never stopped looking for you. I prayed every night that you'd come back. And now," her body shook, her cry breaking the sentence in two. "Now you're here treating me like the world did when they took you from me." The partner stepped back, stunned. The crowd gasped, their phones recording this shocking turn. The officer turned away sharply, his mind racing, his heart hammering. He wanted to dismiss it, call it madness, but something deep inside stirred, something he couldn't silence. He gripped the rope tighter, as though the rough fibers could anchor him in the storm. But the fibers cut into his skin, biting deep, as if punishing him for denying the truth. The baby reached out again, tiny fingers curling toward the officer, as if pulling him into the moment. The sound of his cry was almost unbearable now, echoing like a heartbeat between them. The officer's mask cracked. For just a second, his eyes softened, and doubt filled them. He stared at her through the blur of the crowd and the flashing phones. For the first time, his voice trembled as he asked, "Who are you to me?" The question hung in the air like smoke. "Who are you to me?" The old woman's lips quivered, her entire body trembling as though the weight of decades pressed against her fragile chest. She wanted to shout the truth, to release it all at once, but fear held her tongue. What if he rejected her? What if he laughed again, as the world always had when she spoke of her pain? Her voice broke into the silence anyway. "I am your mother." The words sliced through the murmurs of the crowd. Gasps rippled like a wave, followed by the unrelenting hum of phones recording, capturing every second of this unexpected confession. The officer froze, the rope slackening in his hands. His eyes darted over her face, searching for proof in the wrinkles, in the tears, in the desperate hope shining through her sorrow. He wanted to dismiss her, to tell her she was crazy, yet his chest tightened with something he hadn't felt since he was a boy. Longing. He forced a laugh, short and bitter. "You're delusional. You don't know me," but his voice cracked at the edges, betraying him. The partner officer stared, wide-eyed. "Wait, is she serious? I said she's lying." The first officer barked, but the sharpness of his tone failed to hide the tremor beneath. The woman's tears spilled freely now. She rocked the baby as she spoke, her words trembling yet determined. "I know your face. I know the way your brow furrows when you're angry, the way your jaw clenches when you're holding back tears. I saw it when you were born. I kissed it before they took you from me." The officer's heart pounded so violently he thought the crowd might hear it. He shook his head hard, as if to throw off her words. Stop saying that." But the baby shifted then, letting out a soft cry, and his tiny hand reached once more for the officer. This time, the infant's fingers caught hold of his wrist, clinging tightly, refusing to let go. The officer's breath hitched. His eyes locked on the fragile grip, the warmth of the baby's skin, searing through his uniform like fire. For a moment he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The crowd leaned closer, murmuring, their voices a blend of awe and disbelief. "Look, he's shaking. Is it true? Could she really be his mom?" The officer ripped his wrist free, stepping back sharply, almost stumbling. His mask of authority was slipping, cracking open to reveal something raw, something he didn't want exposed. He barked louder, trying to regain control. "Enough! I don't want to hear another word." But his hands trembled as he tried to coil the rope again. He couldn't steady them. He couldn't steady himself. The old woman's sob carried across the park. "Why deny me? You are the child they stole from my arms. The boy I prayed for every night for 30 years. I see him in you, no matter how much you try to hide it." The officer's vision blurred, not from the setting sun, but from the storm inside him. Memories pushed against the walls he'd built. Nights in foster homes, crying into unfamiliar pillows, asking questions no one answered. He remembered standing in front of a mirror at 12, whispering, "Who am I? Where did I come from?" Now this stranger, this broken, desperate woman, was giving him the answer he had chased his entire life. And yet, to accept it meant his world would shatter. Everything he had built, the discipline, the authority, the walls, would crumble. The baby's cry pierced the air again, raw and urgent. The officer glanced at the child, then at the woman holding him. Her arms shook, not with weakness, but with the strain of love that had never died. His partner whispered almost to himself, "She really believes it. Look at her." The officer snapped his head toward him, fury flashing. "Shut up." But the anger didn't last. It collapsed into silence, swallowed by doubt. The crowd sensed it too. The air buzzed with anticipation, phones still recording. But their amusement was shifting into something else. Curiosity, disbelief, even sympathy. The officer's shoulders sagged. He looked at the rope in his hands, as though seeing it for the first time. A cruel thing, unworthy of the truth, pressing at his chest. Slowly, he let it fall slack by his side. He met her eyes again. For the first time since the confrontation began, his voice softened, trembling. If what you're saying is true," his words trailed off. His throat tightened. The old woman leaned forward, clutching the baby to her chest. "It is true. I carried you. I named you. And I never stopped loving you." The rope slipped from his fingers, dropping soundlessly onto the grass. The crowd gasped, their phones capturing the moment, their whispers swelling into a roar of speculation. The officer stumbled back a step, his breath ragged. His entire world tilted on its axis. His mask had cracked wide open. For the first time, doubt and recognition collided in his eyes. And as the crowd pressed closer, recording every second, he whispered under his breath, "Dear God, what if she's right?" The park was no longer just a park. It had become an arena. The murmurs of the crowd swelled into a chorus of judgment, every pair of eyes glued to the trembling officer and the weeping woman. The smartphones, raised high like torches, recorded everything with cold, unblinking precision. There would be no escaping this moment. The officer's chest heaved as he struggled to breathe, as though the crowd itself was choking him now. His uniform felt too tight, his badge suddenly heavier than the rope that had just slipped from his hands. "She said she's his mother." Someone in the crowd shouted, "Is it true?" Another voice rang out, Dozens of faces leaned forward, hungry for an answer, for blood, for redemption. Some smirked with amusement, others frowned with unease, but all of them demanded something, a confession, a breakdown, a spectacle. The old woman clutched the baby, her body swaying as she rocked him against her chest. Her voice trembled, but carried across the park like a bell. "I am not lying. This man is my son. The system took him from me when he was just a baby, and now he doesn't even recognize his own mother." Gasps, whispers, disbelief. The phones zoomed closer, digital eyes dissecting every wrinkle on her face, every tear staining her cheeks. The officer staggered back a step, shaking his head. No, you can't." He wanted to deny it, to drown her words under the weight of his authority. But his voice cracked like glass. "Look at him," someone yelled from the crowd. "He's shaking. He knows it's true." Laughter erupted, cruel and cutting, but mixed with it were voices of outrage. "How could you treat your own mother like that? Monster!" The officer's partner raised his hands, trying to calm the growing storm. "All right, everyone, that's enough. Back up." But no one listened. The crowd had tasted blood. The old woman's sobs broke through again. "I carried you for 9 months. I prayed for you every day after they stole you. My heart never let you go." She leaned forward, her free hand trembling as it reached toward him. "Don't let the world blind you to who you are." The officer's throat closed. His mind raced, memories clashing with denial. The foster homes, the unanswered questions, the nights he stared at the ceiling wondering if anyone, anywhere, loved him. And now this broken woman was telling him she had loved him all along. The crowd pressed closer, their judgment now a suffocating wall. Some mocked him, others demanded the truth. Every word felt like a stone hurled at him. "You believe her, don't you?" One man shouted, "Say something." Another demanded. The officer's face burned under the scrutiny. His authority, his control, both slipping away faster than the rope he had dropped. He felt stripped, exposed, naked before the eyes of strangers who would decide his fate long before he could. He turned away, muttering under his breath, I can't do this here." The woman's voice pierced him again. "Don't run from me. Don't run from the truth." But he was already moving. His boots pounded the grass as he shoved through the wall of people, ignoring the jeers, ignoring the phones that followed his every step. The crowd erupted into chaos, some chasing him with their cameras, others rushing to the woman's side, recording her sobs, her whispered prayers. She collapsed onto her knees, clutching the baby close as tears streamed down her face. Her cries were not just for the moment, but for decades of loss, for every night she had prayed into silence. The officer, breathless, broke free of the park and stumbled toward the empty street beyond. He leaned against a lamppost, his chest heaving. His hands shook violently, not from exertion, but from the earthquake inside him. His mind replayed the words, "I am your mother." For years he had been searching without admitting it, searching for answers in the shadows of his life, for the missing piece of his soul. And now that it had been handed to him, he wanted to reject it, yet couldn't. The laughter of the crowd echoed behind him, mixing with the woman's sobs, chasing him down the street. No matter how far he ran, he couldn't outrun her voice. "Don't let the world blind you to who you are." He clenched his fists, pressing them against his temples as though he could crush the truth out of his skull. But the cracks in his mask had widened, and the truth was seeping through. He collapsed onto the curb, head in his hands, whispering to the night, "If she's really my mother, then who am I?" The city lights blurred as he sat slumped on the curb, his hands pressed against his face. His heart thundered, not from running but from the storm inside him. The voices of the crowd still echoed in his ears, the woman's cry louder than them all, "I am your mother." He repeated the words over and over, each time feeling them sink deeper into his bones. It made no sense. It made perfect sense. He wanted to deny it, yet part of him clung to it like a drowning man clings to driftwood. Footsteps approached. His partner stopped a few feet away, breathless from chasing after him. "Hey," he said softly, no longer the commanding officer but a worried friend. "What was that back there?" The officer didn't look up. "I don't know. You looked like you believed her," his partner pressed, his fists tightened. "I didn't," but the words sounded hollow. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the hiss of passing cars. Finally, the partner lowered his voice. "You were adopted, weren't you?" The officer froze. The question sliced too close to the truth he'd buried. He turned sharply, anger flashing in his eyes. "Don't go there." But the partner didn't back off. "I've known you for years. You never talk about your family. Never. Now this woman shows up, calls you her son, and suddenly you're shaking. Tell me I'm wrong. The officer's breath caught. He wanted to snap, to silence him, but the words wouldn't come. He saw flashes of his childhood again, the foster homes, the questions, the hollow answers. He remembered one caseworker's slip of the tongue when he was 16. Your birth mother fought hard, but the court ruled against her. At the time, he'd shoved the memory down, burying it under anger. But tonight, the memory clawed back to life. He swallowed hard. I don't know if she's telling the truth. The partner knelt beside him. Then find out. The officer's jaw clenched. The thought terrified him. What if the truth broke him? What if she was just another lie the world had thrown his way? But what if she wasn't? His chest tightened with a different kind of ache, one that came from hope. Fragile, dangerous hope. He stood abruptly, brushing off his uniform as though shaking off the weight of the world. I need to know, he muttered. His partner nodded, reading the resolve in his eyes. Then start with her. She's not going anywhere. The officer hesitated, staring back toward the park. He could still hear the crowd's roar, see the phones raised like weapons. He wasn't ready to face that circus again. Not yet, but he knew where to go. The records, the adoption files, the sealed past the state had tried to bury. Hours later, he sat alone in the dim light of the police archives. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence as he scrolled through digitized records, his fingers trembling. He entered his birth date, the year, the city. His throat tightened when a single case file appeared. He opened it. There it was, his infant photo, grainy but unmistakable. Below it, his birth mother's name. His breath hitched. It was her. The file detailed the court's decision: termination of parental rights due to financial instability, age, and lack of support. Cold words, stamped in ink, deciding the fate of a woman and her child. He skimmed further. Notes from the caseworker. Mother appeared distraught. Begged to keep the child. Promised she could provide. Request denied. His hands shook. His vision blurred with tears he hadn't realized were falling. She had fought. She had tried, and the system had stolen him away. A choke sound escaped his throat. He pressed the file against his chest, his body curling as though to shield it from the world. For the first time in years, he let himself cry. Not the tears of a child, but of a man broken open by truth. When the sobs quieted, he wiped his eyes and stared at the photo again. That woman in the park, frail, weeping, desperate, had once been the young mother in these notes, begging for her son, and he had just put a rope around her throat. The weight of it crushed him. His badge, his authority, his pride, all of it felt like ash. But beneath the crushing shame, something else stirred. A spark, a chance. He whispered to himself, voice raw. She's my mother. The words no longer sounded impossible. They sounded undeniable. He closed the file with shaking hands. His next step was clear. He had to face her again. But would she forgive the man who nearly killed her before recognizing her as his son? The park looked different in the morning light. Where chaos had erupted hours before, now there was only stillness. The grass glistened with dew, the benches damp from the night air. Yet the weight of yesterday still lingered, etched into the silence. The officer returned, his steps slow, deliberate. His uniform felt heavier than ever, every thread carrying the memory of what he had done. The badge on his chest was no longer a symbol of honor, but of shame. Yet he had to come. He had to face her. She was there, the old woman, his mother. She sat quietly on the bench, the baby asleep against her chest. Her long white hair shimmered in the pale sun. She looked worn, exhausted, but there was a strange peace in the way she held the child, as though love itself had kept her rooted to this place. When she noticed him, her body tensed. Her arms curled instinctively around the baby, her eyes wary. He stopped a few feet away, his voice low, trembling. I'm not here to hurt you. Not anymore. I came to tell the truth. The woman didn't reply. Her silence carried the weight of years, the silence of courtrooms that had ignored her, of nights spent weeping alone. He swallowed hard, then turned, not just to her but to the crowd gathering again. Phones raised, whispers rising. Reporters had returned, hungry for answers. This time he would give them one. My name is Officer James Carter, he began, his voice carrying across the park. And yesterday I nearly killed the woman who gave me life. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Cameras flashed. She is my mother, he continued, his voice breaking. The system tore us apart when I was just a baby. I grew up believing I was unwanted, abandoned. But I was wrong. She fought for me. She begged for me. And the world denied her. He turned back to her, tears streaming freely now. And I blinded by anger and pride. Put a rope around her neck. My own mother. The crowd fell silent. Even the reporters lowered their cameras slightly, moved by the rawness of his confession. I can't undo what I did, he said, his voice shaking. But I can choose what I do next. With trembling hands, he unclipped his badge and placed it gently in her lap. The metal gleamed in the morning light, a symbol of the life he was giving up. If wearing this means standing against you, then I don't want it. You are my duty now. Her tears flowed silently. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then with shaking hands, she reached out and touched his face. My son, she whispered. The words shattered him. He fell to his knees before her, his forehead resting against the back of her hand. For the first time in years, he wasn't Officer Carter, wasn't a man hiding behind authority. He was simply her child. The baby stirred, yawning, then reached out a tiny hand that brushed both their cheeks. A fragile bridge between past pain and future hope. The crowd erupted, some clapping, others crying, others still recording. But in that moment, none of it mattered. The cameras, the headlines, the judgment, all faded against the simple truth of a mother and son reunited. She cupped his face with both hands, her voice steady, despite her tears. The world tried to take you from me, but love brought you back. That is stronger than anything they did to us. He nodded, broken and whole all at once. I will spend the rest of my life proving worthy of you. The partner officer, standing at the edge of the crowd, watched with quiet respect. The man who had once been unshakable in uniform was now stripped bare, and somehow stronger for it. The old woman looked at her son, then at the baby in her arms. This child will grow up knowing love, not loss. And you will help me give it to him. He swallowed hard, emotion choking him, but he nodded. I promise. Together they rose. The cameras clicked. But for once, the flashes felt less like weapons and more like witnesses to something sacred. A story not of disgrace, but of redemption. The crowd parted as they walked away, mother, son, and child. Not as a spectacle, but as a family. From despair to forgiveness, from shame to redemption, their story carried a lesson larger than either of them. That love, though buried, cannot be erased. Systems may fail, society may judge, but blood and compassion endure. In the end, the rope that once symbolized pain became the thread that wove them back together. And as they stepped into the sunlight, it wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of a new one. If this story touched your heart, share it. Somewhere out there, another family is waiting for a miracle, another mother praying not to be forgotten. Let this remind us, love is stronger than the world's cruelty. And no matter how broken the past, a new beginning is always possible.